All right, I know there may be some folks that come in here in little bits, but just really appreciate again, everybody being here and really appreciate the folks that volunteered to be part of our panel, even though Tammy is off to the side, she is part of the panel, so consider her that one.
An extension of the
Oh, no, I'm good.
I think it's all warmed up for you.
This is it so far. It may be the Kylie's able to join us, but we kind of alerted her late. If you were not here last week, and no problems if you weren't, we gave an overview of Bridging Forward. And Bridging Forward is, good morning. Yeah, look at that. Good time.
You can sit up here with us, please.
Yes.
It's
You'll
perfect.
have so much to it. You're the one that's finished the whole.
Yeah, you're the success.
Congrats on being a success.
You just walked in.
She is a success story.
But, so last week, we gave an overview of Bridging Forward, and Bridging Forward is a collaborative effort of lots of different organizations, including the United Way and what we call the Community Impact Network, which is a local collaborative of lots of different groups working together to alleviate poverty. Poverty is a huge topic that you can't have one organization trying to solve. And it's so complex, but the collaborative and the United Way 4 years ago said, if we focus on this, we're gonna learn so much about each other, we're gonna learn so much about the systems we need, we're gonna learn so much about how we need to interact and tell a different story about poverty. And it's gonna ripple through the community so that if we invest in individuals, we're gonna have this incredible profound ripple down the line where the whole community is benefiting. So we went through some results and we talked about kind of the overview of it. The project is in its third year now, kind of in different iterations. And we've gone through one full cohort. So what a cohort is what we're gonna represent a little bit today. Participants in the program spend 3 months doing some initial training on financial literacy and goal setting and self-advocacy. And just being with each other, forming a group that is learning together and saying, hey, we're all committed to getting out of the situation we're in and getting some stability. And so after that 3-month period of time, they get matched up with volunteer allies. The allies are also trained and they say, hey, I'm in for a certain amount of time and I'm gonna partner with somebody and walk alongside them. And so that's what today's part of the 3-week story of Bridging Forward is all about, is having you hear from their perspectives. Dave's gonna share a little bit about how it relates to the Gospel of Luke and the lesson for today. And then next week, please come back because we'll have a panel of the Bridging Forward participants. Some who completed the program, some who are still in the midst of things, and they'll be here and be able to share their own experiences. Nothing's perfect, right? This is all a process, and so we don't want to make it sound like, hey, this is all butterflies and whipped cream. Right there, it's a good combination of real beauty and real human beauty and the real challenge of what happens when you do work with human beings and ups and downs. So that's how I think we want to kind of be in this space. I'm going to just start us off with, because it's MLK tomorrow, just kind of connect these dots as well. So a cornerstone of Martin Luther King's fight against inequity, poverty is an issue that crosses race, gender, and cultural lines, affecting people across the nation. Not solely an issue in America, Dr. King recognized that poverty pervaded the globe. Often when speaking publicly in his writings, Dr. King sought unity from other countries, stressing the need for all of us to fight poverty together. Even in his Nobel Peace Prize lecture, Dr. King spoke directly about the evils of racial injustice, war, and poverty. This problem of poverty, Dr. King says, is not only seen in the class division between the highly developed industrial nations and the so-called underdeveloped nations. It is seen in the great economic gaps within the rich nations themselves. So that's something that we see throughout our own community, whether it's a local or state or national level. Dr. King went on to discuss the disparity of wealth in the United States, the richest nation in the world, and the juxtapositions of skyscrapers among the slums, jet planes soaring over the ghettos, and how that sets a tone throughout our entire kind of national discourse. So a good opportunity, I think, to kind of put our local evidence into this kind of arc of all the different folks that have fought against poverty and try to set a tone for that. So I'll stop there. And let,
Real quick before you get started, just to bring everybody up to speed.
Yeah.
Can you like summarize, the results from last week of just the, how many people they can count on, the financial, just to like everybody starting kind of from the same.
you bet.
Good feeling, yeah.
So. You just kind of scoot ahead there, sorry for a minute. And I'm happy to share this with folks if you'd like, I can email it out. So the income increase is one of the things that we're looking for, kind of as a baseline, that this is a poverty alleviation program, so we want to show an increase in income over time. So this is the two different ways to look at it. There's the individual monthly gross. So this is the 5 circle leaders that have completed one program so far and seen a 254% increase in income over time. So over that, basically right now, it's been about 18 months. These are real numbers. So of those 5 individuals, the dollar figure that they were bringing home initially, you can see down here, now that's increased over time. There's probably of the 5, there's 3 that had real significant income gains. There's 1 that's stayed about the same. And another that's been kind of medium. Those are real numbers. Everybody's had a significant financial increase. And then their household income is also something that we measure. So that's, you can see that significantly increases over time. So we also just look at things like one of the main key pieces of bridging forward is to say this is the perfect time to do this. Because we have so many open positions in the community. And if we operate from the standpoint that people are underemployed, we can then start to look at, okay, let's find ways to get folks from wherever they're at and help them, walk alongside them. That's the role of the allies in many ways, walk alongside them to get to a place where they're at a higher wage, even where they have a line of sight on a higher wage. So of those 5 people that I just showed you the information about, there's one who, hey, just getting to that $20 an hour thing has been really good for him. And he's now starting to be in a job that he's never been in a job as long as he has right now, and it's only 8 months. And so he's now on a momentum shift that's like, okay, hey, there's a leadership role for him. There's other opportunities that he can see his eyes and he can see, hey, $25, $30 an hour is within my field of view. So employment increases from full-time to part-time or unemployed. Educational level, we've had a few, and these are all mirrored in the second cohort. I don't have their data up here. But then this is the thing that Susan was talking about, that we ask a question, how many people can you count on for support? And so in the beginning, you can see the number is pretty low. And this is one of the things that you'll see in any story of poverty is that people in poverty are often surrounded themselves by people who are in poverty. And it's very difficult to rely on people who or feel like you have support in that kind of environment. By the end, I mean, that number is, increased 700%. So, there's just a real scale of support that circle grows. And then there's all kinds of opportunities that happen because of that. Just one of the people that's representing that number of 5, just had one of her allies in her house on Thursday, helping her with some plumbing. So this is now 3 months after the program finished. And that's one of those things. It's like, okay, she could have spent money or gotten frustrated and not fixed something that then could have gotten to a bigger issue, but she's learning now how to handle those things herself that she didn't have before. When she was down here, who do I call when I have a plumbing issue? Besides somebody that I'm gonna have to spend a lot of money on. So
Thanks.
that gives you a little sense of things. I'll pause there and take it from here.
Yep. It's a happy coincidence that today, the scripture passage that we're going to read in worship just coincides. In fact, I can't think of a better scripture passage. It coincides so nicely with what I think Bridging Forward and many of our social justice programs at the church try to achieve. And it's from the Gospel of Luke, and this is also a little plug for I guess, Sunday school classes that are going to happen during the week or the time of Lent, about 7 Sundays during Lent. We're going to look at the Gospel of Luke and, some of the aspects of that very, very unique gospel. But this one, we've been reading through Luke in our worship services. We saw, of course, Jesus' birth. Last week, we talked about Jesus' baptism. But this is the place where Jesus is going to announce his ministry. He has been tempted by Satan in the desert, and now he wants to, well, these days people would call it a brand, right? You know, this is Jesus' brand right here. So he goes to the synagogue where people would get up, you know, the Jews would come together and they would read from scripture. And as was often the case, you could call on somebody from, you know, the congregation, a male, to get up and read the scripture, and Jesus was called on. And he opens the scroll, and this is what he reads. He reads this from the book of Isaiah, prophet Isaiah. And I'll read this for you. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of the sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And then, of course, he closes the scroll and everyone's looking at him. And little side note here, people are looking at him because they probably would have known this passage pretty well. Jesus stops mid-sentence to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, comma. What else, Jesus? You know, they knew the passage. The next line is, and to also proclaim the year of God's vengeance. So Jesus, in his ministry, as he's starting to proclaim who he is, he's throwing out God's vengeance. In other words, there's no other these days. There's no longer us and them. There's no longer Jews and Greeks, male and female, slave and free. It's important that the passage here refers to Jesus anointing, because literally that's what Messiah means. The Messiah, the Christ, the anointed one, the one who is going to come to proclaim God's kingdom. And what are the aspects of that kingdom? Very simply, proclaiming good news, giving a sight to the blind, release of the captives, the very undoing the bonds of iniquity that were just so prominent in society at that time. And so if this is the foundation, if this is the brand of Jesus' ministry, and we as a church are the body of Christ, then it is also our brand as well. And I think it's so coincidental, that we're reading this passage today, but it's also very coincidental that so many from our church feel, at least if not, you know, consciously, at least feel an unconscious commitment to these types of values, breaking the bonds of oppression, which, as I've come to realize, you know, in this program, are around us in ways that we do not see. And I think that's what we would like to talk a little bit about. I know I've learned a lot since being part of this program, and I haven't even been in the program a year. But weekly conversations, well, actually we meet bi-weekly. I don't know if you've mentioned this or not. One of the questions I suggested is, how important are our common meals that we have? We meet on Monday evenings, every other Monday evening. And I think those common meals have been perhaps the most important, because it is, you know, eating together, breaking those distinctions that keep us apart, is one of the signs of the kingdom, part of our brand. Sorry to use such a colloquial expression, but it's one that people recognize these days. So with that, I will sit down.
That's fantastic. And maybe that's a great place to start. The meals. And maybe let's just start there. What's been the impact of that for you? Does everybody understand the structure? So I'll do that real quick so you're not wondering about it in your minds. Andy and Constance actually volunteered to create a great meal beforehand. And they bring it in and set it up, and this is over at Peace Lutheran Church, which helps provide also people who set up and serve and then clean up. And so it's been a nice kind of marriage between these two faith communities. But people will start arriving about 5:15. They bring their kids. And you have we ask everybody to sit together, and their parents are eating with their kids at that time. But it's a great opportunity to, hey, mix it up. You can eat with your allies, you can eat with others, but that is a real purposeful time to be with each other. And then after about 30 minutes, we'll say, hey, start transitioning. And if you've got kids, let's bring them over to the childcare team and they're going to take them away. And then the allies and the participants will then go from there and either work together, all in a group, and we'll have some common conversations, or they'll partner off and do some time with each other. The circle leader is the participant, and it's their role to lead their circle. So the allies are part of their circle of support. And this has been a tough part. This has been a little bit of a challenge for us. How do we have somebody who's not necessarily been used to advocating for themselves? How do they work with, veritable strangers in some ways in the beginning to help, get those people together and lead them through their goals? So well, I'll pause right there. I don't want to explain it too much, but I'd love to hear, kind of similar to how Dan shared. What's the impact of the meal for you? And remember, this doesn't have to be a rosy picture. If there's been some challenges, I think share the challenges.
All right, I have a couple comments to make. My participant, my circle leader, is a gal I never would have met. I wouldn't have crossed paths with her ever, had it not been looking forward. And had I heard her story a couple of years ago, or 1 year ago, I probably would have been sympathetic in a detached kind of way. We've made some bad choices. You succumb to the lure of a hard drug addiction, fell afoul of the law, gone to live serious time in state prison, and pay the price. I've come to know her one-to-one, and I noticed a change in her. Get to that in a minute. Change in me too. What I'm seeing in her is she's a person on her journey, optimizing as close as reasonably possible, optimizing her options, optimizing her life. I'm the same thing. And so when I look at her now, when I see her now, and I witness her well-being, it seems like my well-being as well. And when I see her setbacks, it feels in a visceral sense, without intellectualizing it, her setbacks feel like setback. And that's something that I didn't notice was happening until it already happened. I thought, good heavens, Andy, you just made a shift. At 72 years old, there was not a huge dynamic shift, but enough of a shift that was noticeable. Wow. When I met her, she was quietly desperate. She worked at a job she hated. She was responsible for caring for a 19-month-old granddaughter while the child's mother was in prison. They're going to be in prison until July. And she's still taking care of her daughter and doing a very good job, doing the best she can. She's also fighting type 2 diabetes. She was worried about amputation, which turned out not to be, anyway, he wants to save her life. She has multiple issues. And she's, I would say, within herself, displays a courage that I would find difficult to follow because it's not considered what she has to do. And I'm highly impressed with the changes she's made. She's not as desperate now. The job she hated, she quit. She found another job, part-time job, 2 part-time jobs, which are not, I would call it enviable jobs. I would. But for her, it's a step up. And she's, I would say the word stable. She's going step by step by step, and realistically not grabbing everything. She doesn't say, I want it all, I want it now. She's I know what I need to get for now. She's waiting for July, and the daughter is out of prison. Granddaughter is taken care of with child's mother. And I guess that's really all I have to say.
I think those Monday night dinners have been nice for us to get to know the different circle leaders and their children, but also the allies that are volunteering in the program, because, I've see you guys all at church, but I feel like I have a different relationship and have got to know you all better through this time we spend, as well as the circle leaders. And I appreciate Brady always at the end. We all thank Constance and Andy for their preparing the food, and also the people that from the church that serve the food. And they come every time, the same 3 or 4 people to serve that food. And they want to be a part of that. And they involve themselves in the Monday night dinner as well, which I think is very important. So we bring a lot of different people together.
My circle leader has 10 kids. And so one of the things I really appreciated during the meals was seeing how the older kids take care of the younger kids. In a way that I didn't have to do with my kids. And so I was always really impressed by the maturity of some of her older kids and their ability to see what needed done and do it without mom saying anything.
And I would say too, that the college circle leader is a good example of somebody who was pretty cautious about working with allies to begin with, and I would, I don't know, that I'm gonna just hazard a guess that the meal has really helped. They give her a little bit of space around kind of, because it's really just, hey, we're chatting and we're talking about kid things and we're and giving her a little sense of, hey, there's another human being here. I don't know if you'd say the same, but that would be
Yeah, for sure.
my impression. Anything for you, Constance? Welcome here.
Oh, well. We enjoy, Andy and I enjoy preparing them.
13 or-
Yeah, we often cook here at our church in the kitchen. Which is a wonderful space. I spend a lot of time just thinking about, okay, what would be a good meal and trying to think about for them kind of modeling what's inexpensive and healthy that they can eat.
And you share the recipes at the end.
Yeah,
The basics, which I think is wonderful. This is just potatoes and tomatoes and some macaroni or whatever. You
But
can do
also,
it.
yeah, I'm kind of a champion for getting away from processed foods. So that part is fun.
So let's just pause right there. What are the foods that are the easiest to purchase,
Right.
cheap? When I'm stressed and overwhelmed, what foods do people gravitate towards? Processed foods, right? That are not necessarily healthy, that are maybe quick, that maybe seem inexpensive, right? You can get a $5 meal deal right now at McDonald's. Seems like it's got everything you need. You're gonna be full. And not a healthy meal for you. We had one gal that was spending, somewhere like $200 a week on DoorDash. Because she has 4 kids and life is crazy and she didn't even realize it until she was able to go through her budget and had her allies help her ask the question, where is the money going? And then it was this very kind of astounding life realization, like, oh my goodness. And so there's a tiny little shift of like, okay, let's actually not worry about the job thing right now. Let's think about like, what are some things that might help get your feet underneath you just right there around mealtime so that that's not a $200 drain on your income every week. But it is really great to see the meal piece come out and like, hey, this is accessible. This is not too tough. You can, a couple pushes of the button, a couple cans opened and it's in a pot and getting warm. And now there's gonna be leftovers for things to freeze later on. So those little things I think really help.
Yeah, I think it's ironic, and I'm sure you all know this, but I'm gonna point it out anyway, we live in the wealthiest country in the world. But one of the top indicators for poverty is people being overweight. It doesn't make sense in the rest of the world, go to Colombia or something, or well, I don't know. But it's the poor food that we're eating that, does not get processed well in our bodies, that we just make us put on the weight. So what Constance and Andy are doing, though I wish we could be a little bit more deliberate about it. I wish we could have a cooking class.
Well, that was kind of what we thought about in the beginning. I have another friend who was real interested in teaching cooking, because Jenny and I and Sharon and others used to be involved in a weekly food distribution apart from United Harvest, where we'd give out a box of produce every week. And we found that we had a lot of Hispanic people, and Will was involved in that too, who were thrilled. And other people would say, just give me the hamburger. I don't want the vegetables.
Yeah.
I mean, this is more the white people, interestingly. But, you know, culturally, Hispanic people cook from scratch. And so I thought, I kind of saw a need for people to learn to cook. It's not that tough, you know, and it's pretty fun. And at least I think it is.
I think, just one last thing, and another thing about the meals that's nice is I get to know some of the other circle leaders. And I just want to tell a brief little story, and because it happened last week, Amanda always seemed, just kind of withdrawn and, maybe not just completely committed to everything. Maybe a little sullen at times. But last week she came in and she and her significant other had just bought a house. They had the opportunity to garden on this property. The house had some fruit trees and she was just lit up. I've never seen her like that before. Of course, I didn't know her that well, but she was, had a new energy. She had new hope. And I don't know that would have been the case had she not been involved in this program. And it's not that, the program got her the house or anything, but perhaps gave her the self-confidence to say, yeah, I can do this, right? What are your thoughts on that, Brady? Because you probably know her better than any of us.
I don't necessarily take credit for any of it. I think you're right that it maybe was sort of a kind of a gradual ethos. But what I think you're kind of pointing to is that the community piece of the Monday nights is really important to people, and the participants. I think they'll say that's probably what I am coming for, is to be around other human beings and to be in a place where I could say things that are a little bit vulnerable for me. And I have a sense that people are there and have my back. And that just is one of those things as human beings, for people that have lots of support in our lives, that's, hey, I can take that for granted. I think it's for folks that, hey, that may be a little bit unique, and it also may be unique at the level of conversation. People are able to say things they're really excited about, but also things that are really frustrating or really sad about, or that they're really stuck on. And so I think that could be a sense for Amanda in particular. Is like, yeah, I've got something I'm really proud of. I want to share with people who I know me. Right. And that's I think people are often really surprised. They're like, hey, this is a human being thing. And I don't have to necessarily hold back just because folks seem like they've got a lot more money in their pockets than I do. I can tell by having dinner with them and sitting around and talking about things that this is another human being in the room with me.
I agree. The meetings are artificial situations, not a customary social event that people meet. And the rules are customary rules that you would find are not in play in those meetings. It's artificial, like a group, and it's a permission. People have permission to speak about their vulnerabilities.
And she shared with us that she really wanted to garden and wanted to learn to can.
Do the
These are-
canning.
So, yeah.
Yeah, help you with that.
Swarm.
Can I add an observation about that as well? When we're talking about poverty, we have generational poverty.
Right.
And these, the circle leaders had never learned how to cook like that, had never been exposed to things like that. And not only are they being exposed to that and learning it, their kids are being
Right.
exposed to it as well and are learning how to sit around and have a meal together, and that's normal, and that's how to do that, and learning those behaviors that their parents had never learned either. So as much as we're impacting that circle leader, we're impacting the next generation as well. And if we're going to start to turn this ship around, I'm paying as much attention to those kids as I am to the circle leaders.
One of those kids love to come. You can just see it in their eyes. I mean, they walk in the door and they're looking for their buddies. And and they don't sit together because they sit with their family. But as soon as dinner's over, they are together and they build that bond with each other. And so the circle leaders do too, right? I don't know how many of them knew each other before they came into this group, but they rely on each other and they feel comfortable with sharing things. And then us allies, we kind of hear other things and somebody would be like, well, what did you do? And how did you do it? So it becomes more of a group conversation than just more of a one-on-one.
Learning together.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guy that went to the house to help fix the plumbing, one of the kids there said, I miss coming to cohort. And I think that's, probably true for them. That is a neat communal time. There's lots of questions that Dan and Constance came up with, and so we can, if there's some that we want to go to, if people have particular questions you want to ask, I think go ahead and throw them out. I appreciate the one that Constance helped with and Dan on the first one. Before you embarked on the program, what did you expect? How were your perceived notions, preconceived notions, especially about others, challenged by your experience? And if there's anything that we're trying to do with the education of our community, we call it raising our poverty IQ. That there's this impression and story and narrative that we have, and we did this last week. If you're here, I asked you to close your eyes and imagine somebody, stereotype of somebody that's in poverty. And we talked about, the stories that we make up there and how it's an incomplete picture. And so anybody, you can all answer this one or just whoever it resonates for. How are your preconceived notions, especially about others, challenged by your experience so far? No wrong answers to this part.
Well, I think we all tend, I don't know if it's just part of human nature, but we all tend to focus, maybe we're taught this way, this is learned behavior, to recognize otherness in externalities. You know what I mean? Who would wear those terrible sneakers, or who would, not get their hair cut when they're trying to be out in public. All those things that are just really not important, but deep down inside, obviously we share a lot together as human beings, the need for companionship, the need to be loved, the need to give, the need to, all those other just very basic human needs. And the more we're segregated, the more we focus on those externalities, I think. And I think our culture is kind of geared toward making us focus on those externalities. Just advertising in general, right? So it was nice for me, many of the folks there, I remind me of some of my early childhood experiences and people that frankly for my entire life I've been trying to run away from, really. But personally, it's helping me to kind of get in touch with some of the things that I really haven't, worked on in terms of my own personality, I guess, or in terms of my own early experiences. And so my preconceived notions were pretty much learned experiences that I'm trying to dismantle and deconstruct in that way. So,
I would echo that pretty much. As I said, I probably wouldn't have met Margaret ever. And if I met across from the street, I would probably a year ago, they'd lose her. Keep going, I wouldn't want to. I met myself with her, but I'd be comfortable with her. It's different. So I've changed. So I don't want to make it about me. I'm in on it. So that's a little bit is about more about Margaret, primarily her and the other circle leader. Yeah, meshing.
I'd heard about the program a lot in work when you were starting it. You and Jody visited a lot with the Community Foundation about some of that, getting going and some funding to help with it. So I was curious, but I reached out to Jody and asked, and then I thought, oh no, I'm not qualified for this. I can't do this. But really you can't.
Yeah.
It just, I was scared at first because I thought I'm not skilled in any of this, especially when it comes to you know, I feel like that's our society, we put a lot of Band-Aids on things, you know, a little bit of money here and throw a little bit of money at somebody here, but that's not helping them grow, so it's been a learning experience for me, a tremendous learning experience, and I've enjoyed it. There's things that I'm overwhelmed with sometimes, but then my circle leader is doing wonderful, and she's just grown by leaps and bounds. She was such a quiet introvert, and she's really come out of her shell, and I think this will be like a lifelong friendship because she's just a very special person.
What do you equate the coming out of her shell?
Oh, I think she came, her growing up, she was at a very, very young age addicted to all sorts of drugs. And then she has 2 children, lost her children, went to jail. Had to really work. She didn't think there was ever the possibility of getting her children back, which she did. And she has a very close relationship with her children. They live in apartments, like all in the same building together. And actually her son and his wife and child moved in with her. So, she's very close with her family, but she was just very reserved. And I don't think outside of her family, well, I'll take that back. She has a lot of support for her, with her drug and alcohol, helpers that she's going through. She has that support, but I don't think she would ever talk to them about some of her, you know, financial issues or some of her concerns and goals. And I think she's built a real trust with her 2 allies, and we talk to her or meet with her almost weekly. And whether it's in a text or a cup of coffee, or I love to go on walks with her because we can talk a little bit about this, but we get off this subject real fast and just get into something that just seems real normal, like she's, you know, like we just have known each other forever. So it's just been a wonderful opportunity. Now I was in the first cohort and didn't have a real positive experience with that because my gal never came. So tried to stick with the program for a while, Amy and I. And then you guys invited us to come to the next cohort. So this has been positive for me because I was a little bit questionable on the program after.
And a strikeout again for Tammy in some ways. And so I think it's fine to talk about that too.
Yeah, so Steph had a person and she never showed up. And so then Steph and I partnered with a gal, and I don't know if we ever even met with her.
I don't think so because
She never showed up. And so I said, all right, I don't know if I can bring any value to this or not. Brady says, come on, let's do number 2. So I did. The gal that I had for number 2, she had a lot. She had a lot. A lot. Her husband passed away unexpectedly. Her son refused to go to school. Drug abuse. I don't know if she was ever in prison or not, but a lot. And I think what ended up, and so a couple of the good things that did come out of it, we started looking at the budget and I said, well, if she was working, but they got hurt. So then she was on disability. No, she was on workman's comp and was getting a very small percentage of what she was making. And I'm looking at this going, there's no way you can afford to live on what you're getting in compared to what your bills are. So you start looking at, you know, get rid of Netflix, get rid of this, I mean, you've got to downsize. And I think it just became way too much for her to take. She had like been injured, so she'd had the injury. And then she had a family member in Iowa that said, come over. And I think that was her calling card to get out of this. And so she jumped from this. I'm not sure if she moved or not. Do we know?
No, there, but then came back, yeah.
Yeah, she's back.
Did she?
I think she applied where my girl works because she.
Okay, so nothing has really worked for her. I think she's just trying to figure out life. And I don't know if she's ready for this program yet. Maybe she will be in a year. I don't know.
She would call me at the community foundation and she had these wonderful big ideas that she wanted to do, but kind of have to bring her down and say, we need to work on you first. I know you will have these, I mean, she was having yard sales and bicycle rallies and stuff to support different things, but I'm like, we need to work on you. She had a home that she like, no siding, no windows, I mean, all this stuff. you can push your hand through it. I'm like, we gotta figure
You,
and not, then you can, when you get yourself stable, you have wonderful ideas. Then we can look at those ideas. But until then, the focus needs to be on you.
so it was tough, and I hope that she can get herself back together again so that she can become part of the program, because I think she can definitely benefit from it. I think one of the things that I always saw her, she always was looking to somebody to fix her problem. It was never her fixing her own problem, it was somebody else needed to take care of it. So she was always talking to Tammy and Brady's team on what can you do next? What can you do? What can you do? And, you know, part of it is you have to take responsibility for what you can do on your own. So I don't know, I'm not really sure where she's gonna land.
It's a great distinction of, first, challenges of mental health. And its intersection with where people are at. We probably have that in 3 or 4 folks that, it's a real, that is the issue. And so working on financial stability, yeah, okay, that's a nice to have. But do we need to really work on the stability piece? More importantly, knowing that then is gonna ripple out. So that's one key piece. The other piece that Tammy's mentioning as well is the almost, it's want to be careful about talking in broad generalities, right? But we talked about, hey, food and health is a key kind of across the board. Financial literacy is a deficit almost 100% of the time. There is a lack of experience and knowledge around budgets and managing debt and identifying priorities financially. And so there's 3 goals in Bridging Forward. One is that they get to 200% of the federal poverty line. So that's a real number. We could say, hey, that's our target. That's very close to a living wage. 3 months of savings, which is a target for anybody, right? That you have enough money to handle 3 months of expenses if your income cuts off, and then reducing your debt to income ratio to below 43%. That's a huge one. And debt is one of the main barriers to economic prosperity. We'll have folks that the first gal that Steph was working with that was having a tough time showing up. One of her incredible overwhelms in life was the amount of debt that she had. That she was paying interest on tables that she rented as a rent-to-own thing. And that the monthly thing that she had due was worth more than the table at that moment. But it had become this thing that, the predatory aspect of some of these opportunities, people look at it and say, hey, that's very appealing. And then it's life happens. And it's very difficult to keep managing these things. So we're still working at that part. I don't think we have not come up with a great system that works for everybody to get really rigorous about financial stuff, because there are all these other plates that are spinning. But for whatever that's worth, I think that's a key piece, and Tammy's expertise in the financial world, we're gonna keep using that more and more.
So do you have speakers come to the cohort meetings?
We'll have some stuff, we want to have it be as interactive as possible, so, yes, we have, Laura's studio with the YWCA has a financial literacy thing that we have done. We've got some folks from the CCC that come and share about different opportunities there. The goal is like, hey, here's a little thing to chew on. Now go chew on it with your allies, and see what comes up from there.
But you had some people too say, I don't know if it was Tammy or, Kelly from 5 Points, but just, hey, here's how we're gonna consolidate some of that, debt. So it's like, being able to consolidate that under one program, again, both financial literacy and saving them money,
Right.
every month. So there's a lot of tools there.
One of the things that maybe Kylie can speak to a little bit, just figuring out where all the money is and where the accounts are and where the debt was a real challenge.
Yeah, I was gonna kind of share that one of the defining parts of my experience was actually the word frustration. The gal that I was partnered with, my circle leader, and by using that language, you can tell that the idea is for them to be the leader of what's happening, which I love that model. She didn't want to lead, however. She didn't have a vision of where to go. She knew things weren't great, but yet at the same time, she knew she was getting by. And amazingly, with 10 kids, she didn't have debt. That wasn't an issue for her.
How's that happen?
Yeah, I because there's a lot of services when you have 10 kids. But one of the frustrations we would, or where we ran into frustration is anytime we try to come up with something to move towards, there were blocks. Either blocks in her mind or blocks in reality. So, for example, the guy, the dad of the last 5 kids or 6 kids or so, kind of a loser. But, you know, he's willing to be a part of this family with 10 kids. So we didn't want to leave him in the dust, even though I kind of wanted to leave him in the dust. Because where are you going to find another life partner to help with 10 kids? That's a hard sell. But at the same time, he's kind of sucking a lot of energy from her, and his younger brother lived with them too. And she's practically parenting that kid too. So there's frustration of just like clearing up relationships, and they had 2 houses between them, but she couldn't get rid of one of the house payments or rentals. She couldn't get rid of one because if they're together, then something about how his income impacts her services. You know how those things work. So there's a frustration there. She had a good job at Starbucks, or does still have a good job at Starbucks. And is paid a pretty darn good wage considering she doesn't have a high school degree, she doesn't have a GED. But as we would talk to her about, you could probably make even more money somewhere else. Oh, but I don't want to because I really like Starbucks. Oh, but my boss doesn't treat me well. Well, let's find a different job. But I can't get a different job because I actually have a 401k with Starbucks and I don't want to lose that. And, there would just always be these frustrations and blocks whenever we try to move forward in some way. I mean, even just the simple fact of let's get your GED, let's get that going. But I can't find childcare because my childcare subsidy is blocked by some paperwork that my boss won't turn in. I mean, just every little thing couldn't move forward. And it just made me think how lucky I am when I want to make a change, I make a change. If I want to get a different job, I get a different job. Or if I want to, do something different, I do. I don't have the level of blocks that she has to deal with.
Both real and perceived.
Exactly.
Yeah,
real and
whether it's
perceived.
the benefits cliff or like, gosh, maybe it does make sense for you to move in all together and share household expenses or whatever. But the system makes it easier to make a different choice.
Right.
Yeah, and then some of that is, your own perceived story, which we all have our own limitations on perceived stories too. Wow, that's interesting.
But you get mired in this self-identity that makes you afraid of success. I think there's a fear of success, like, I don't know what it would be like if I, was successful in this new way. So it's easier for me to just stay like this because it's the devil instead of the devil you don't, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you saw that or not, but.
Yeah, perfect.
And one of the, you can imagine, this stuff that Callie's talking about, those are all things that are good. It's a long time horizon to get to a solution. Every single one of those things that she mentioned, that's not a, hey, we're gonna fix this by Tuesday. This is gonna take several months worth. And so one of the structural components of the program that we're working on is, as Dan said, it's every other week. We're moving to an every week model, and the allies still come every other week, but the circle leaders are there every week to keep some momentum going. And I think that's what we found is that if Kylie's circle leader missed one, then it's a 4-week gap between this conversation that they started, January 7th, and now it's not till February 7th that we're finishing up or we're trying to tap onto it. And sometimes the communication in between is easy, sometimes it's not. So that's one of those reality pieces, but the model works in terms of, hey, frequent, long-term, consistent pieces where the conversation is evolving over time. And then the piece that really needs to have happen as well is that the circle leader at some point takes that a little bit of vulnerability into, okay, I'm gonna do this thing. And I'm gonna roll the dice a little bit here, and I'm gonna have Kylie walk alongside me because it's a little bit uncomfortable and I'm a little bit nervous. But I'm gonna need this person to hold my hand a little bit here. Do you want to just, we've got just 5 or 6 minutes. Do you have questions? I mean, we could go back to these, but questions that you'll have.
How do individuals get selected or referred or chosen for this program?
It's by choice, and so people really have to say, hey, I'm in, and I'm in for a year. That's one thing we struggle with. I think I shared last week that we've lost 50% of each of the cohorts. So we had 11 people in each group sign up. And by the time they were getting ready to be matched with their allies, we'd lost half of them. Part of it is maybe due to this, we need to stay on this regular schedule. Part of it is, hey, it's kind of intimidating to get matched up with the allies. We're not quite sure. But we're trying to work a little bit harder at making sure on the front end, hey, you know what you're signing up for. So people need to be at 185% of the federal poverty line or less. They're not in crisis, so they're, if there's a housing and they don't have a house or they're dealing with addiction like currently, then that's not appropriate for bridging forward. Let's get you a little bit more stable and then have this bridging forward conversation. They go through their own orientation, an interview, fill out an application. So there's lots of touch points where people get a chance of saying, hey, this is right for you or not. So oftentimes referred from other programs as well.
Yeah, how do they find out about it?
There's getting to be some good communication in the community about, so lots of the different service agencies now know about bridging forward. We've been able to showcase this success. We've been able to get a little bit better about saying, hey, this is the person that's going to do well here. These are the people that maybe not do well just yet. And so trying to spread the word a little bit more about that. We have a new group that'll start up on Monday. And so right now there's 13 people that have gone through the orientation and completed the application for that. And we'll probably have a couple of weeks of kind of, hey, let's all get to know each other. And then we're going to ask again, are you in? Now that you've learned a little bit more about this, are you in? Well, to answer your question, yeah, Chuck.
This feels like a drop in the bucket. How big of a problem do we have in Hastings? And if this was ultimately perfectly successful, how long would it be before we didn't have a problem in Hastings?
Yeah. So two things. So first off, it can very easily occur like a drop in the bucket. A little bit more scale for you. The 30% by 2030 is 700 households in the 4-county area in the next 6 years. So you think about it that way, 700 households. The poverty rate in Hastings is 12%. But remember last week, if you were here, I said that the estimated Alice poverty rate, which is asset limited, income constrained, employed. So these are folks who are 200% of the federal poverty line or less. So they're making money, they're employed, but they're not making a living wage money. That's around 29 to 32%, somewhere in there. So that's a significantly larger amount of people. So there's a little bit of context for you. So definitely drop in the bucket. Jody's point is really key that we got to remember this is a long horizon of impact that we're rippling out in the 5 cohort leaders here and the 7 that are in the second group. There's 43 kids involved and an additional 18 other household members. So we're talking, we're getting close to 80 people, if you pull all those together. It's a little bit different way to think about it. When you look at the household size, it gets to be a little larger. But we're limited. So we're in conversation right now with some funders around doing a lot of different scaling up. We spent the last 2 years looking at okay, hey, does the model work? And we've proven the model works. Now we've got to build the capacity to be able to do this in 7 or 8 places in these 4 county areas. Maybe not to this scale. The model works if there's, 2 people at the Clay Center Church that say, hey, we want to be allies. And we got 3 or 4, parishioners here that, could use our help. We could get a little thing going there. If we had another church say, hey, we take on 3 or 4 people, we get that. It doesn't have to be quite the same intensive meeting weekly. There's dinner, there's childcare, variation. But there's also some really great conversations going around. I don't know if you've been hearing about the guaranteed basic income programs. These are happening throughout the country. This is the idea that let's get people on a consistent basis for several months at a time a cash benefit, no questions asked, that gets them to living wage. So oftentimes it's about $1,000 for 7, 8, 12 months. Los Angeles County, City of Los Angeles have invested $60 million. They're one of maybe 100 different projects that have been happening around the country. They're all proving pretty strong metrics that when you give people this cash benefit, without a lot of questions asked, it frees up them to do childcare and education and take off relief around transportation issues. So this is similar in the idea that, hey, there's big ideas that we can do that can move the needle a little bit quicker on this.
That could help scale up a lot. When I was reading the research that Brady forwarded me, it was amazing how even, whether it was $1,000, a month that you're just giving them, they were making great decisions. And a lot of those other things, Maslow hierarchy of needs, disappeared, if you will. And so they were able to say, hey, I have the space to create a vision for my life because I'm not worried about where my next meal is going to come from or, all of that. So I was really shocked by that. I was kind of like, you're just giving them a handout. What this is going to end in complete disaster. And the research is 180 degrees different. And so I do think when you think about a solution for our 4 counties and the generosity that we have here, we could follow that model and it would move it more quickly.
And not only that, I mean, the money is circulated in the local economy too. That's what
Yeah.
a lot of people don't
Yeah.
get, you're just giving them money. Yeah, but that money doesn't stay in their hands very long.
Sure.
And it's gonna be circulated, so.
Yeah, that's a good point from
The thing we'll share at the end, sorry, last thing real quick, next week, we'll give you the data on the return on investment. So it costs the United Way and the funder that we have at the state level, this amount of money to create these programs. Here's the increase in income and community benefits, like Dan's mentioning, here's the reduction in government expenditures, people that are getting off programs. Here's the future forecasted impact of the community benefits because the children are anticipated to not be in that generational poverty cycle. So. Other questions? I know we're done here with time, but any last big ones?
Jody, it looked like I interrupted you before, or were you gonna say something and I interrupted you? I'm
No.
sorry.
No.
All right.
I would add, Chuck, I have to sometimes catch myself in thinking like, holy cow, this is like 12 circle leaders we've done so far, and we're talking about 700. Like that, I have to mentally shift my brain and thinking like, but that's still 12 people that we started with that we had to prove this concept first and prove that this works before we could go think about how we can scale this to ultimately impact the 700. And we knew that it was going to take time. I'm not usually a patient person, and I wanted it to go right now, but we had to prove some of this. One other thought, we also knew from the beginning that this was going to be about a 50% success rate. They told us that from the very first conversations we had. So I so appreciate both Steph and Tammy when it didn't work to begin with. We knew that was gonna happen. We wish it wouldn't happen. But from a realistic standpoint, it is going to happen. And I so appreciate you both like, okay, let's try again and maybe the next one will be better. And so I appreciate all of you that devote time and energy to this. I know there's 8,000 other volunteer things that you could be doing in our community. But I appreciate and are doing absolutely, yep, devoting the time and energy to this in all different ways. So I would just say thank you.
Yeah, I was excited to see, I can't remember his name, but he started out in the second cohort, then he moved. And now he's moved back, Bill, and now he's gonna try and come back on cohort 3. So, I mean, he must believe enough in the program because he wouldn't have probably had to jump back in, so.
Just big hand for the folks that. And thank you all for coming. I think, please come back next week. We'll have the circle leaders here and be able to ask questions as well as hear from them. But thank you all very much. No?